In 1934, a Kansas farmer could lose everything to a drifter with a knife, so he kept one of his own folded deep in his overalls. Back then, your pocket wasn't just for keys and coins. It was a toolbox, a tackle box, and when the night turned mean, your last line of defense. Number 8 was carried by nearly every farm boy in America, and in the right hands it could drop a hawk out of the sky or a man to his knees. And number 2, lawmen feared it more than a pistol because it left no mark and made no sound. These weren't weapons of war, they were weapons of survival, slipped quiet into a working man's pocket. Before we count them down, hit subscribe, because what these objects say about how hard those years really were might surprise you. Let's begin with number 25. Number 25, the pocket whetstone. Before any blade could be trusted, it had to be sharp, and the small oil-darkened whetstone was the quiet foundation of every farmer's pocket. He would pull from the bib of his overalls a flat sliver of Arkansas novaculite, no bigger than a stick of gum, worn smooth in the center from 1,000 passes. On a Sunday after church, when the fields rested, a man would spit on the stone, draw his knife across it in slow circles, and listen for the whisper that told him the edge had come back. A good stone cost a nickel and lasted a lifetime, often passed from father to son, already grooved to the angle of the family blade. It put no holes in a man, but it made every other blade he owned twice as dangerous. Without it, a knife was just a dull strip of steel. With it, the humblest tool turned deadly serious. Number 24, lead fishing sinkers. A handful of lead sinkers rattling in a pocket looked like nothing, just tackle for a lazy afternoon at the creek. But in lean years, those soft gray weights were worth more melted than dangled. A farmer would pour them into the toe of an old sock, knot it tight, and suddenly the fishing gear became a quiet persuader for a stray dog or a man who came too close to the smokehouse. Lead was the one metal a poor family always seemed to have, salvaged from busted batteries, spent shot, and the river bottom itself. Children gathered it like treasure. A pound of sinkers might cost a dime at the hardware store, but most folks never paid, casting their own in muffin tins over the kitchen stove. Soft, heavy, and silent, lead asked no questions and left few answers. It was the raw material of a dozen improvised defenses. Number 23, fish hooks and snare line. A coil of waxed line and a paper of hooks weighed nothing, but they meant the difference between meat and want. Most farmers ran trot lines on the creek, but the same line strung between two saplings made a snare for rabbit or squirrel, and a man who could set a snare never truly went hungry. The hooks themselves, barbed and small, were guarded like coins. A bent or rusted one was straightened and resharpened rather than thrown away. Hobos riding the rails learned to beg or barter for them, knowing a single hook could feed a man for a week. During the worst of the Dust Bowl, when crops blew away and money vanished, that little packet of steel was survival folded into a pocket. It hunted, it fished, and in a pinch, a fistful of hooks could make even a friendly visitor mind his manners. Number 22, the hoof knife. Every man who kept a horse or mule carried a hoof knife, its curved blade hooked at the tip for digging stones and rot from a tender frog. It lived in the bib pocket, close at hand, because a lame animal in plowing season could ruin a family. The hook-shaped edge, kept wickedly sharp, sliced through packed mud and hard hoof alike. But that same curve that cleaned a hoof could open a sack, gut a catfish, or, turned the wrong way in a bad moment, hook into something softer. Farmers thought nothing of it as a weapon. It was simply always there, riding in the pocket from sunup to dark. A blacksmith might sell one for 15 cents. The leather sheath wore thin and shiny against the denim. In a world that ran on horsepower, the hoof knife was as essential as the boots on a man's feet. Number 21. The quirt. Coiled like a sleeping snake, the braided rawhide quirt hung from many a farmer's wrist or rode looped in his overalls. Built to turn a stubborn mule or move cattle through a gate, it ended in a short popper that could crack like a pistol shot and raise a welt through a flannel shirt. A good quirt was braided by hand over long winter evenings, strands of soaked rawhide woven around a lead-shot core in the handle, and that hidden weight was the secret. Flicked one way, it stung an animal to obedience. Swung the other, that loaded handle became a club. Drifters who tried the back roads learned that a farmer with a quirt was not a man to crowd. It cost $1 from a saddle maker or nothing at all from a patient hand. The quirt spoke a language every living thing on the farm understood. Number 20. The frog gig. On warm nights, when the bullfrogs sang along the creek bank, a farmer slipped a 3-pronged gig into his pocket and went hunting protein in the dark. The barbed tines, lashed to a cane pole at the water's edge, speared frogs and fish with a quick downward jab, and frog legs fried in lard were a feast in years when the smokehouse hung empty. Folded or unscrewed from its pole, the iron head rode easy in a pocket, its points wrapped in a rag. Children learned to gig before they learned to shoot, but a tool built to drive 3 barbs into a slick frog needed no explanation as a defense, and more than one prowler met the business end of one in the dark. A gig head cost $0.10 at the feed store. In the hungry years, it put cheap meat on the table when nothing else would. Number 19. The Saddler's AWL. A leather worker's awl looked harmless, just a short steel spike set in a smooth wooden handle, but it punched holes through harness, boot, and belt that a knife never could. Every farm ran on leather, traces, reins, plow lines, all of it cracking and breaking and needing repair, and the man who could stitch his own tack saved a fortune. So the awl rode in the bib pocket beside the knife, point guarded by a cork or a twist of rag. That same needle-sharp spike, 4 inches of hardened steel, made a fearsome surprise for anyone who mistook a quiet farmer for an easy mark. An awl cost a nickel and lasted decades, the handle darkening with sweat and oil. It mended the things that held a farm together, and now and then it ended an argument before it got started. Number 18. The folding pruning saw. Orchard men and woodlot farmers carried a folding pruning saw that snapped open like a giant pocket knife. Its curved blade was cut to bite through green limbs on the pull stroke. It tamed apple trees, cleared fence lines, and bucked small firewood far from the barn. The teeth, aggressive and raked back, chewed through wood with a sound like tearing cloth. Folded shut, it slid into a deep pocket and rode forgotten until needed. A man rarely thought of it as anything but a tool, yet a saw that ripped through oak in seconds was no gentle thing, and its very presence made a stranger think twice. The better ones, stamped from Sheffield steel, cost $50 and were sharpened with a special file by lamplight. In a country where most heat and most fences came from a man's own hands, the saw was wealth folded into a pocket. Number 17. The hawkbill knife. The hawkbill folded down to a fat little package, but opened to reveal a blade curved like an eagle's talon, ground sharp on the inside of the hook. Built for cutting twine, slashing seed sacks, and pulling through rope in a single draw, it was the rigger's and the farmer's friend. That inward curve meant it caught and cut whatever it hooked, dragging the edge deeper the harder you pulled, perfect for a binder cord, frightening for anything else. Tobacco men used them to prime leaf, hay men to slice baling wire. A hawkbill rode in the watch pocket, opened with a thumbnail, and snapped shut against a thigh. It cost $0.25 at the general store. Folks respected the hawkbill because it did one thing with terrible efficiency. It cut on the pull, the way nothing else in the pocket did, and a man learned fast to keep his fingers clear. Number 16, the corn knife. Corn knife. Closer to a short machete than a pocket tool, the full-sized corn knife was too long for any pocket, but its folding little brother rode the overalls of every man who cut fodder by hand. The big blade hung from the belt during harvest, heavy enough to lop a corn stalk in one swing and keen enough to shave. Through the long days of cutting and shocking corn, a man's whole world narrowed to the swing of that blade. It was the closest thing most farmers owned to a sword, and they handled it with the easy respect of long use. Drifters working the fields for a meal eyed it with care. A corn knife cost 2 bits at the hardware store and was reground each season on the grindstone. In hard country, the line between a harvest tool and a weapon was only a matter of which way you swung. Number 15, the belt hatchet. Small enough to ride in a deep coat pocket or hang from a loop, the belt hatchet split kindling, drove fence staples, and helped butcher hogs come November. Its short handle and heavy head delivered a blow far past its size, and a farmer kept the edge bright enough to shave a curl of pine. It was the most honest tool a man owned, and the most frankly dangerous, because no one ever mistook a hatchet for anything gentle. Hobos carried them too, for chopping firewood at the jungle camps along the rails, and a flashed hatchet ended more than one quarrel before it began. A good plum or Kelly head cost $50 and was handed down like an heirloom. Through the lean years it built, mended, and fed, and on a dark night, the simple weight of it in a man's fist was comfort enough. Number 14, the ice pick. Now here's where the list takes a darker turn. The ice pick lived in nearly every kitchen drawer in America, a slim steel spike for chipping blocks delivered by the Iceman. But lawmen of the era came to dread it. Why? Because an ice pick made a wound so small it barely showed, so clean that country doctors sometimes missed it entirely. Slipped into a coat or the long pocket of a pair of overalls, it looked like nothing and explained itself easily. Every house needed ice. During the Depression, when the old ice box still ruled most farm kitchens, the pick was beyond suspicion. A farmer carried his to chip ice for the churn and the lemonade, but he knew, as everyone quietly knew, that the same harmless spike kept its secrets better than any blade. It cost a dime and asked no questions. Number 13, the castrating knife. Among the most specialized blades a stockman owned, the castrating knife had a short, razor-keen edge built for one swift, necessary job on bull calves and shoats every spring. It folded small and rode deep in the bib pocket, brought out only when the work demanded it. The blade was kept surgically sharp because a dull one meant a botched cut and a ruined animal, and that obsessive edge made it, in a pinch, one of the most cutting things on the place. Most farmers would never have dreamed of raising it against a man. But a stranger who did not know its purpose only knew that the quiet fellow in front of him had just produced a blade you could split a hair with. It cost 30 cents from the veterinary catalog. Like so much on the farm, it was built for husbandry and survival, and only by grim accident for anything worse. Number 12, the skinning knife. When a deer hung from the barn rafter or a coon came off the trap line, the skinning knife went to work. A short, fat, upswept blade designed to slip between hide and flesh without nicking the meat. It rode in a leather sheath inside the overalls. The edge curved so it peeled rather than cut. A trapper in the Depression might run a line of 40 sets before dawn, and the pelts he skinned with that blade brought hard cash when nothing else did. A good fox hide fetched real money in 1933. The knife stayed scary sharp from constant stropping. Built to open an animal from end to end, it needed no instruction as a weapon, though few ever used it so. It cost 40 cents at the hardware. For a man feeding a family on fur and game, the skinning knife wasn't a luxury. It was the tool that turned the woods into a paycheck. Number 11, the stockman knife. If the Barlow was the farmer's everyday companion, the three-bladed stockman was his Sunday best. A handsome folding knife with a clip blade, a sheep's foot, and a spay blade, each ground for a different chore. The big clip blade dressed game and whittled, the sheep's foot cut rope clean on a board, and the spay was made for the very animal work that gave the knife its name. A man kept all three honed and oiled, opening and closing them by the fire out of pure habit. It cost a whole $1, a serious sum in those years, so it was often a gift, marking a boy's passage into a man's work. The bone handles wore smooth and amber with age. 3 blades meant a stockman was rarely caught without the right edge, and any one of them snapped open with a thumbnail made a stranger reconsider his manners. Number 10, the sheath knife. Where folding knives ruled the pocket, the fixed blade sheath knife rode the belt for heavier work, a solid 5 inches of carbon steel with no hinge to fail at the wrong moment. Hunters, trappers, and farmers who worked far from the house trusted it for everything from splitting kindling to dressing a deer, and its full tang could pry, chop, and stab where a folder would snap. The leather sheath, often homemade, hung at the hip or tucked into the waistband of the overalls. A man felt its weight all day and was glad of it. There was no pretending a sheath knife was only a tool. It was frankly built to be relied on when things went wrong, miles from help. A good one cost 75 cents. On lonely roads and in dark barns, the steady presence of that blade was the difference between worry and calm. Number 9, the straight razor. Every grown man shaved with a straight razor, stropping it to a singing edge on a leather belt each morning, and that same beautiful edge made it one of the deadliest things a person could slip into a pocket. Folded into its bone or celluloid scales, the razor looked like a harmless personal item, which is exactly why it traveled where other blades could not. In the rough world of the rails and the hobo jungles, the razor earned a dark reputation, a man who flashed one-settled disputes fast. On the farm, it was simply part of being respectable, a clean-shaven face for church and town. The finest German and Sheffield blades cost $1 or more and lasted 50 years. A farmer kept his wrapped in oilcloth against the rust. Honed to where it parted a hair without effort, the straight razor was civilization and menace folded into the same small handle. Number 8, the slingshot. Here's the one nearly every farm boy in America carried, cut and carved with his own hands. A forked branch of dogwood or hickory, 2 strips of red rubber salvaged from an old inner tube, and a leather pouch from a worn-out shoe tongue, that was a slingshot, and in the right hands it was no toy. A boy who practiced from sunup could knock a sparrow off a wire, take a rabbit for the pot, or drive a hawk off the henhouse from 40 feet. Grown men kept them too, for varmints and for keeping a respectful distance between the chicken yard and a stray dog. The ammunition was free. Creek pebbles, ball bearings, or those lead sinkers melted down round. It cost nothing but an afternoon to make. Silent, accurate, and endlessly reloadable, the humble slingshot put meat in the pot and ran off trouble without ever spending a precious shotgun shell. Number 7. Brass knuckles. Now we hit the kind of thing folks didn't talk about in church. Brass knuckles are more often a homemade set poured from melted lead or scrap iron in a sand mold, turned a bare fist into a hammer. They rode flat and hidden in a bib pocket, weighing almost nothing, drawing no eye until the moment they were needed. Through the Depression, when desperate men rode the rails and farms, sat lonely and far from any sheriff, a working man wanted something that worked up close and quiet. Knuckles fit the bill. No powder, no noise, no telltale blade. Country fairs and rough taverns saw plenty of them. They could be bought through the mail for a quarter or cast at home for nothing. Today, they are flatly illegal in many states, but back then they were just another piece of hard insurance a careful man kept close, hoping never to use it. Number 6. The slungshot. Not to be confused with a slingshot, the slungshot was a sailor's weapon that drifted inland, a heavy weight on the end of a short cord or braided handle, swung to deliver a stunning blow. Farmers and hobos made their own from whatever lay around, a round river stone or a fishing sinker sewn into a leather pouch, a length of sash cord, a knot to grip. It rode coiled in a pocket, looking like a bit of harmless rope. A flick of the wrist sent the weight out hard and fast, and unlike a club, it could be tucked away in an instant. In the rail yards and the hobo camps, the slungshot was so feared that many towns banned it outright by name. It cost nothing and was made in 10 minutes by lamplight. Quiet, deniable, and brutally effective, it was the great equalizer of men who owned nothing else. Number 5. The cane sword. Here's where things turn almost gentlemanly. A sword cane looked like a simple walking stick, and plenty of older farmers and country preachers leaned on one going to town, but a twist of the handle drew a slim blade hidden down its length. Born in fancier times, these canes filtered down to the countryside through estate sales and mail-order catalogs, and a man who'd hurt his leg in the fields found one served two purposes. He could walk to church on it and, if the road turned dangerous after dark, defend himself with a yard of steel no one suspected. The blade was thin but wickedly pointed, made for a quick thrust. A decent sword cane cost a few dollars, real money, so it marked a man of some standing. Most who carried them never drew the blade in their lives, but the secret of it traveled with them everywhere, hidden in plain sight in the crook of an arm. Number 4. The derringer. Small enough to vanish in a closed fist, the derringer was the hideout gun of choice for anyone who wanted protection without the bulge of a holster. One or two stubby barrels, a single heavy slug, it was useless at distance but formidable up close. Exactly the range a farmer feared most when a stranger came too near in the dark. It tucked into a bib pocket, a boot top, or the bottom of a flour sack under the wagon seat. Through the Depression, when banks failed and cash was carried on the body to market, a derringer was quiet insurance against the men who watched the roads. They were cheap by then, a few dollars for a worn one traded at the feed store. A farmer hoped never to draw it, but the simple knowledge of its weight against his chest let him drive the lonely miles to town and home again with an easier mind. Number 3. The owl-head revolver. By the 1930s, the most common pistol in rural America wasn't some gleaming Colt. It was the cheap, top-break owl-head revolver, named for the owl stamped on its grips. Mass-produced by the millions for $1 or $2, it found its way into nearly every farmhouse drawer and a great many overall pockets. Chambered for the humble 22 or 32, it wasn't much against a charging bull, but it ended snakes, dispatched injured stock, and warned off two-legged trouble just fine. A farmer slipped one in his bib when he walked the back 40 or drove to market with the egg money. Pawn shops and hardware stores sold them used for pocket change. They were rough, sometimes unreliable, and after a generation of hard use, plenty were more danger to the shooter than the target. But for a poor man, the owl head was the great democratizer, real protection that even a sharecropper could afford. Number 2, the leather sap. Lawmen of the 1930s feared this one more than a pistol, and for good reason. The leather sap left no mark and made no sound. A flat, spring-handled strap of leather sewn around a slug of lead, the sap, or blackjack, fit the palm and rode flat in a hip pocket, all but invisible. One short swing put a man on the ground without a cut, without a gunshot, without a sound to carry across a quiet farmyard at night. Police carried them, and so did the men police chased. In the hard years, they passed through pawn shops and mail-order pages for $1, or were stitched up at home from a harness scrap and a fishing weight. A farmer kept his by the door or in his overalls when strangers worked the harvest. Of everything a careful man carried, the sap was the most personal and the most quiet, protection that asked no powder and told no tales. And finally, in first place, number 1, the Barlow knife, the one tool no farmer was ever truly without. 2 blades, a slab of bone or wood, a long iron bolster, plain, cheap, and tougher than anything. For a single dime, it gave a man everything. It cut twine and whittled pegs, peeled apples and gutted fish, trimmed harness and cleaned fingernails, and dressed a rabbit, all in a day's work. A boy's first Barlow marked his first step toward being a man, and he carried it until the blades wore to slivers from a lifetime of sharpening. It rode in the right-hand pocket of every pair of overalls in America, warm from the body, opened 10,000 times a year. And when the day turned mean, when a drifter crowded too close, or a stray dog showed its teeth, that same humble blade, snapped open with a practiced thumb, was the oldest and truest defense a working man owned. It built the country quietly. It still rides in pockets today. These 25 forgotten things tell a story bigger than any one blade. They are proof of a generation that trusted its own 2 hands, that turned a dime's worth of steel into a tool, a meal, and a measure of safety all at once. Most have vanished from our pockets now, traded for a comfort our grandparents never dreamed of. But the resourcefulness they carried is worth remembering. Which one surprised you most? Tell me in the comments, and if your own grandfather carried one of these, I would love to hear the story.